Okay, so let's just jump right into this. In the world of AI, things are always moving fast, right? But what just happened? Well, it's on a completely different level. We're not talking about one little breakthrough. We're talking about two massive, seemingly separate revolutions that have just completely redrawn the map.
And honestly, that's not an exaggeration. We had two major developments drop almost at the same time. One came from a team you might not expect, and the other came straight out of Google's labs. And together, they signal a fundamental shift in how AI is built, who gets to build it, and what it can actually do.
So we've got two huge stories unfolding here. On one hand, you have an open source model that has reached a level of power that, frankly, a lot of people thought was impossible outside of a closed off corporate lab. And then on the other hand, Google has completely flipped a notoriously difficult problem on its head. So let's break down what this new era really looks like, starting with that first revolution. And that first titan is a model called Hermes 4. And look, this isn't just another small update. This is a massive leap for open source AI. It's proof that you don't have to be a tech giant to build something that's truly world-class. Let's just start with the sheer size of this thing. We're talking about 405 billion parameters. That's not just a big model, it's absolutely colossal. A number like that puts Hermes 4 in the exact same weight class as the most powerful proprietary systems on the planet.
And it's not just big, it's incredibly smart. Hermes 4 is hitting accuracy scores over 96% on really complex reasoning tests. And that right there is a historic number. I mean, even the top closed source models have a hard time getting there. For an open source project to hit that mark, it's a total game changer. So how does it do it? Well, one of its killer features is this idea called a hybrid reasoning flow. If you ask it something simple, you get a quick, direct answer. But if you give it a complex problem, it completely shifts gears and shows you its work, laying out its entire chain of logic, step by step. And that transparency is so important because it builds trust. You can actually see how it's thinking.
You know, the magic behind Hermes 4 wasn't some secret stash of data. It was a much smarter way of training. They used this two-part system. First, an engine they called DataForge created millions of high-quality synthetic reasoning examples. Then another system, Anthropos, acted like a super strict bouncer, filtering out any hint of bad logic. And the result of that? The model learned real, adaptable logic, not just how to memorize a bunch of answers. They also tackled a huge, annoying problem with AI, the rambling. You know, when a model just gets stuck in a loop and spits out endless nonsense? The Hermes team specifically taught the model how to stop, and they cut down these runaway generations by almost 80%. And they did it with only a tiny, tiny hit to performance. That's a massive win for stability and just making the thing reliable. So the big takeaway from this first revolution is pretty simple. The monopoly that these closed, proprietary systems have had for so long, well, it might be coming to an end. Hermes 4 is basically a loud and clear statement that with the right techniques, the open source community can build AI that can go toe-to-toe with anything the billion-dollar corps can cook up. Okay, so now let's pivot to our second revolution, because this is where it gets even more interesting. While the open source world was proving it could match the giants, Google was quietly reimagining a really foundational problem. And this isn't just an improvement, this is a totally new way of thinking. The problem is something called regression, which is just a fancy way of saying predicting stuff based on complicated data. And for years, this has been an incredibly fragile, manual, and frankly painful process. Engineers would spend forever building these models that would break if you so much as looked at them wrong. But Google's new framework, RLM, just changes the entire game. And the idea is actually beautiful in its simplicity. Instead of trying to force all this complex system data into rigid spreadsheets, the regression language model, or RLM, treats it all like structured text. So think of system logs or configurations written in JSON or YAML. All of a sudden, predicting system performance becomes a language problem, which is something modern AI is ridiculously good at. It just neatly sidesteps all of that fragile manual work. And the results, I mean, they're just staggering. In Google's own tests, using this RLM framework dropped prediction errors by a factor of more than 100. Let me say that again. 100 times better. That is not a small improvement. That's a fundamental breakthrough.
And the real-world impact of this is going to be huge. We're talking about powering super accurate digital twins for complex simulations, optimizing massive cloud systems, streamlining manufacturing lines, and speeding up scientific research. It takes a task that was once a nightmare and makes it universal, flexible, and way, way more powerful.
So let's step back. We have these two enormous parallel breakthroughs, an open source model that has climbed to the top of the mountain and a completely new way of doing prediction from Google. So what does it all mean when you put them together?
Well, it signals a new era that's really defined by two big ideas. Hermes 4 is a revolution in access. It proves that world-class AI power isn't locked away anymore. Google's RLM, on the other hand, is a revolution in approach. It proves that we can go back to old problems and find radically better ways to solve them. So one is about democratizing power, and the other is about inventing totally new kinds of power.
And when you put those two trends together, you just get this feeling of incredible acceleration. High-level reasoning isn't just for humans anymore, and complex prediction isn't clumsy or expensive anymore. As the source material puts it so well, this feels like it's more than just technology. It feels like destiny unfolding.
Which, of course, leaves us with the really big question. With open source models getting more powerful than ever and foundational problems being totally reimagined, we are at a historic turning point. The revolution isn't coming, it's here. The only question now is, what happens next?